He was not charged with criminal offenses, nor was he charged with violating any law, nor of wronging any individual in person. And all these facts are known to thousands as well by his foes as by his friends. I am almost ready to say, as did Manlius at the cross, truly this was the Son of God. That is written in Matthew and also in Mark.
Couldn't resist, mate.
Good morning, world. Today we're going to be reading out of the Archko volume, and we're going to be reading Pilate's report to Tiberius Caesar. This is chapter 8, and it's found starting in page 128 of the Archko volume, Archko volume. You can find the free PDF online, but I'm going to go ahead and start. I might not read all of it. I'm just going to skip around where some of the highlighted parts are. That way I could try to go through the whole letter in a fairly short amount of time. Vallius's notes, Acta Pilati, or Pilate's report to Caesar of the arrest, trial, and crucifixion of Jesus. Vallius Patroclus, a Roman historian, was 19 years old when Jesus was born. His works have been thought to be extinct. I know of but 2 historians that make reference to his writings, Priscian and Tacitus, who speak of him as a descendant of an equestrian family of Campania. From what we gather from these writers, Vallius must have been a close friend of Caesar, who raised him by degrees until he became one of the great men of Rome, and for 16 years commanded the army. He returned to Rome in the year 31 and finished his work, which is called Historia Romania. He held the office of praetor when Augustus died, and while Vincius was consul. Vallius says that in Judea he met a man called Jesus of Nazareth, who was one of the most remarkable characters he had ever seen, that he was more afraid of Jesus than of a whole army, for he cured all manner of diseases and raised the dead. And when he cursed the orchids for fruit trees their barrenness, they instantly withered to their roots. After referring to the wonderful works of Jesus, he says that although Jesus had such power, he did not use it to injure anyone, but seemed always inclined to help the poor. Vallius says the Jews were divided in their opinion of him, the poor class claiming him as their king and their deliverer from Roman authority, and that if Jesus should raise an army and give it the power, he could sweep the world in a single day. But the rich Jews hated and cursed him behind his back and called him an Egyptian necromancer, though they were afraid of him as of death. Vallius Patroclus B. 72, found in the Vatican at Rome. Now this is getting into Pilate's report. Pilate's report to Tiberius Caesar, Emperor of Rome. Noble sovereign, greeting. The events of the last few days in my province have been such of character that I will give the details in full as they occurred, as I should not be surprised if in the course of time they may change the destiny of our nation, for it seems of late that all the gods have ceased to be propitious. I am almost ready to say, cursed be the day that I succeeded Valerius Flacius in the government of Judea, for since then my life has been one of continual uneasiness and distress. On my arrival at Jerusalem, I took possession of the praetorium and ordered a splendid feast to be prepared, to which I invited the Tetrarch of Galilee with the high priest and his officers. At the appointed hour, no guest appeared. Oh my gosh! That might also be why the Pharisees thought that Jesus was referring to them when he was talking about that parable of the rich ruler that told his servant to go invite all the people, and then they all made their excuses and they didn't come. And so he said, go to all of the neighboring towns and then go to the highways and byways. And then that said that the Pharisees perceived that he was talking about them. But it literally did happen. Pontius Pilate invited all of the people, like the Tetrarch of Galilee with the high priest and his officers. So all the high priests were invited to go to Pilate's little feast, the banquet, his little welcome party. He created an open house, invited all the Jews to come. None of them show up. So that's what's happened so far. And it really reminds me of that parable about Jesus sending his servant to the highways and byways. This I considered an insult offered to my dignity and to the whole government which I represent. A few days after the high priest priest deigned to pay me a visit. His deportment was grave and deceitful. He pretended that his religion forbade him and his attendants to sit at the table of the Romans and eat and offer libations with them, but this was only a sanctimonious seeming, for his very countenance betrayed his hypocrisy. You see, look, Pontius Pilate is calling out the hypocrisy of the Pharisees too. Although I thought it expedient to accept his excuse from that moment, I was convinced that the conquered had declared themselves the enemy of the conquerors. You know, much like Native Americans with the Americans, the black people with the white people. It's just always like that, the oppressors, the Korean people with the Japanese people. And Pontius Pilate is observing this. And I would warn the Romans to beware of the high priests of this country. They would betray their own mother to gain office and a luxurious living. All right, now I'm going to keep skipping to the highlights. An insatiate thirst for conquest to extend our empire beyond the means of defending it, I fear, will be the cause of the final overthrow of our whole government. So, I mean, he's making some observations here that are pretty wise. Among the various rumors that came to my ears, there was one in particular that attracted my attention. A young man, it was said, had appeared in Galilee preaching with a noble unction a new law in the name of the God that had sent him. At first I was apprehensive that his design was to stir up the people against the Romans, but my fears were soon dispelled. Jesus of Nazareth spoke rather as a friend of the Romans than of the Jews. One day, in passing by the place of Siloam, where there was a great concourse of people, I observed in the midst of the group a young man who was leaning against a tree. So Pontius Pilate is being an eyewitness to Jesus in this moment. And he's watching, observing Jesus leaning up against a tree. And this is what he says. I was told it was Jesus. This I could easily have suspected. So great was the difference between him and those listening to him. His golden-colored hair and beard gave to his appearance a celestial aspect. He appeared to be about 30 years of age. Never have I seen a sweeter or more serene countenance. That was a contrast between him and his hearers, with their black beards and tawny complexions. Unwilling to interrupt him by my presence, I continued my walk, but signified to my secretary to join the group and listen. My secretary's name is Manlius. Keep in mind this name Manlius because he's the one that actually says, truly this was the Son of God at the crucifixion. That guy's name is Manlius, and he happens to be Pontius Pilate's secretary. He is the grandson of the chief of the conspirators who encamped in Etruria, waiting for Catiline. Manlius had been for a long time an inhabitant of Judea and is well acquainted with the Hebrew language. He was devoted to me and worthy of my confidence. On entering the praetorium, I found Manlius, who related to me the words Jesus had pronounced at Siloam. Never have I read in the works of the philosophers anything that can compare to the maxims of Jesus. One of the rebellious Jews, so numerous in Jerusalem, having asked Jesus if it was lawful to give tribute to Caesar. Oh, there goes another passage found in the gospel accounts. Let's see what Pontius Pilate says to see if the story lines up. He replied, so Jesus is replying, render unto Caesar the things that belong to Caesar, and unto God the things that are God's. Oh my gosh, that's like verbatim. If it was on account of the wisdom of his sayings that I granted so much liberty to the Nazarene, for it was in my power to have had him arrested and exiled to Pontus, but that would have been contrary to the justice which has always characterized the Roman government in all its dealings with men. This man was neither seditious nor rebellious. I extended to him my protection, unknown perhaps to himself. So Pilate is saying he extended his protection even though if Jesus may have not even known it, because he respected him, he held him in high regard, and he knew that he wasn't out to stir trouble against the Romans, especially once he heard, render unto Caesar the things that belong to Caesar, and unto God the things that are God's. I extended to him my protection, unknown perhaps to himself. He was at liberty to act, to speak, to assemble and address the people, and to choose disciples, unrestrained by any praetorian mandate. Should it ever happen, may the gods avert the omen. Should it ever happen, I say, that the religion of our forefathers will be supplanted by the religion of Jesus. That literally happens, guys. That's a foreshadowing. When Constantine merges the pagan religions with the church, he created the universal Roman Catholic Church. And that's where their whole religion gets supplanted and created a new one, the mother of harlots. But that's another rabbit hole we can go into. Should it ever happen, I say, that the religion of our forefathers will be supplanted by the religion of Jesus, it will be to this noble toleration that Rome shall owe her premature death, while I, miserable wretch, will have been the instrument of what the Jews call providence and we call destiny. Scribes and Pharisees, he would say to them, you are a race of vipers. You resemble painted sepulchres. You appear well unto men, but you have death within you. At other times he would sneer at the alms of the rich and proud, telling them that the mite of the poor was more precious in the sight of God. Complaints were daily made at the praetorium against the insolence of Jesus. These are all instances that we find in the gospel accounts. You know that in my veins flows the Spanish mixed with Roman blood, as incapable of fear as it is of weak emotion. When the Nazarene made his appearance, I was walking in my basilic, and my feet seemed fastened with an iron hand to the marble pavement, and I trembled in every limb as does a guilty culprit through the Nazarene, though the Nazarene was as calm as innocence itself. When he came up to me, he stopped, and by a signal sign he seemed to say to me, I am here, though he spoke not a word. For some time I contemplated with admiration and awe this extraordinary type of man, a type of man unknown to our numerous painters, who have given form and figure to all the gods and the heroes. There was nothing about him that was repelling in its character, yet I felt too awed and tremulous to approach him. Jesus, said I unto him at last, and my tongue faltered, Jesus of Nazareth, for the last 3 years I have granted you ample freedom of speech, nor do I regret it. Your words are those of a sage. I know not whether you have read Socrates or Plato, but this I know, there is in your discourses a majestic simplicity that elevates you far above those philosophers. The emperor is informed of it, and I, his humble representative in this country, am glad of having allowed you that liberty which you are so worthy. However, I must not conceal from you that your discourses have raised up against you powerful and inveterate enemies, nor is this surprising. Socrates had his enemies, and he fell victim to their hatred. Socrates was put to death by his enemies because he was polluting the minds of the youth. Yours are doubly incensed against you on account of your discourses being so severe upon their conduct. Against me on the account of the liberty I have afforded you. They even accuse me of being indirectly leagued with you for the purpose of depriving the Hebrews of the little civil power which Rome has left them. My request, I did not say my order, is that you be more circumspect and moderate in your discourses in the future, and more considerate of them, lest you arouse the pride of your enemies, and they raise against you the stupid populace, and compel me to employ the instruments of the law. The Nazarene calmly replied, Prince of the earth, your words proceed not from true wisdom. Say to the torrent to stop in the midst of the mountain gorge. It will uproot the trees of the valley. The torrent will answer you that it obeys the laws of nature and the Creator. God alone knows whither flow the waters of the torrent. Verily I say unto you, before the rose of Sharon blossoms, the blood of the just shall be spilled. He's talking about the blood he's going to spill. I will protect you against them. My praetorium shall be an asylum, sacred both day and night. Jesus carelessly shook his head and said with a grave and divine smile, when the day shall have come, there will be no asylums for the Son of Man, neither in the earth nor under the earth. The asylum of the just is there, pointing to the heavens. That which is written in the books of the prophets must be accomplished. Young "Young man," I answered mildly, "you will oblige me to convert my request to an order. The safety of the province, which has been confided to my care, requires it. You must observe more moderation in your discourses. Do not infringe my order. You know the consequences. May happiness attend you. Farewell." "Prince of the earth," replied Jesus, "I come not to bring war into the world, but peace, love, and charity." Previously to this, Herod called on me at the praetorium, and on rising to take leave after some trifling conversation, asked me what was my opinion concerning the Nazarene. So Pilate is talking with King Herod, and he's asked him what his opinion is of Jesus. I replied that Jesus appeared to me to be one of those great philosophers that great nations sometimes produced, that his doctrines were by no means sacrilegious, and that the intentions of Rome were to leave him to that freedom of speech which was justified by his actions. Herod smiled maliciously and saluted me with ironical respect, departed. 3 powerful parties had combined together at that time against Jesus. First, the Herodians and the Sadducees, whose seditious conduct seemed to have proceeded from double motives. They hated the Nazarene and were impatient of the Roman yoke. The Pharisees were the avowed enemies of Jesus. They cared not for the government. They bore with the bitterness the severe reprimands which the Nazarene for 3 years had been continually giving them wherever he went. Timid and too weak to act by themselves, they had embraced the quarrels of the Herodians and the Sadducees. Besides these 3 parties, I had to contend against the reckless and profligate populace, always ready to join a sedition and to profit by the disorder and confusion that resulted therefrom. It's just like today when people raid the streets during the pandemic and during blackouts. You see that all the time. People just trying to take advantage of the situation, all these NPCs. Jesus was dragged before the high priest and condemned to death. It was then that the high priest Caiaphas performed a divisory act of submission. He sent his prisoner to me to confirm his condemnation and secure his execution. I answered him that as Jesus was a Galilean, the affair came under Herod's jurisdiction and ordered him to be sent thither. That literally happens in the Bible. I have taken a wife from the Gauls who pretended to see into futurity. So Pontius Pilate is talking about his wife, and his wife is like some new age crystals, like, oh, I'm gonna meditate. She thinks that she can see into the future. I had taken a wife from among the Gauls who pretended to see into the future. Weeping and throwing herself at my feet, she said to me, "Beware, beware, and touch not that man, for he is holy. Last night I saw him in a vision." That happens in the Bible. He was walking on the waters. This stuff right here is not said. So this is new information right here. He was walking on the waters. He was flying on the wings of the wind. He spoke to the tempest and to the fishes of the lake. All were obedient to him. Behold, the torrent in Mount Kidron flows with blood. The statues of Caesar are filled with geminide. The columns of the interim have given way, and the sun is veiled in mourning like a vestal in the tomb. Ah, Pilate, evil awaits thee. If thou wilt not listen to the vows of thy wife, dread the curse of a Roman Senate, dread the frowns of Caesar. So that actually happens in the Bible. Pontius Pilate's wife said that she suffered a great dream about this righteous man. Have nothing to do with him, for he is a righteous man. There was but one who appeared to be calm in the midst of the vast multitude. It was the Nazarene. After many fruitless attempts to protect him from the fury of his merciless persecutors, I adopted a measure which at the moment appeared to me to be the only one that could save his life. I proposed, as it was their custom to deliver a prisoner on such occasions, to release Jesus and let him go free, that he might be the scapegoat, as they called it. But they said Jesus must be crucified. So remember in the Gospels, he wants to set Jesus free, and they said, "Give us Barabbas. Crucify Jesus." I then ordered Jesus to be scourged, hoping this might satisfy them. This also happened in the gospel accounts, but it only increased their fury. I then called for a basin and washed my hands in the presence of the clamorous multitude, thus testifying that in my judgment Jesus of Nazareth had done nothing deserving of death, but in vain. Also in the Bible, By degrees, the day darkened like a winter's twilight, such as it been at the death of great Julius Caesar. It was likewise the Ides of March. I, the continued governor of a rebellious province, was leaning against the column of my basilic, contemplating athwart the dreary gloom these fiends of Tartarus dragging to execution the innocent Nazarene. All around me was deserted. Jerusalem had vomited forth her indwellers through the funeral gate that leads to Germanica. An air of desolation and sadness enveloped me. My guards had joined the cavalry, and the centurion with a display of power was endeavoring to keep order. I was left alone, and my breaking heart admonished me that what was passing at that moment appertained rather to the history of the gods than that of men. A loud clamor was heard proceeding from Golgotha, a place of a skull. That was where Jesus was crucified. Another corroborating detail, which borne on the wind seemed to announce an agony such as was never heard by mortal ears. Dark clouds lowered over the pinnacle of the temple, and setting over the city covered it as with a veil. So dreadful were the signs that men saw both in the heavens and on the earth, that Dionysius, an Areopagite, is the reported to have exclaimed, either the author of nature is suffering or the universe is falling apart. Whilst these appalling scenes of nature were transpiring, there was a dreadful earthquake in Lower Egypt, which filled everybody with fear and scared the superstitious Jews almost to death. This also happened in the Bible. I returned to the praetorium sad and pensive. On ascending the stairs, the steps of which were still stained with the blood of the Nazarene, I perceived an old man in a suppliant posture, and behind him several Romans in tears. He threw himself at my feet and wept most bitterly. It is painful to see an old man weep, and my heart being already overcharged with grief, we, those strangers, wept together. And in truth, it seemed that the tears lay very shallow that day with many whom I perceived in the vast concourse of people. I never witnessed such an extreme revulsion of feeling. Thus who betrayed and sold him, those who testified against him, those who cried, "Crucify him! We have his blood!" all slunk off like cowardly curs and washed their teeth with vinegar. As I am told that Jesus taught a resurrection and a separation after death, if such should be the fact, I am sure it commenced in this vast crowd. "Father," said I to him. He's talking to Joseph of Arimathea. He calls him Father. "Father," said I to him, after gaining control of my feelings, "who are you, and what is your request?" "I am Joseph of Arimathea," replied he, "and come to beg of you upon my knees the permission to bury Jesus of Nazareth. This happened in the Bible." "Your prayer is granted," said I to him, and at the same time I ordered Manlius to take some soldiers with him to superintend the interment, lest it should be profaned. A few days after, the sepulchre was found empty, the empty tomb. His disciples proclaimed all over the country that Jesus had risen from the dead, as he had foretold. This created more excitement even than the crucifixion. As to its truth, I cannot say for certain, but I have made some investigation of the matter, so you can examine for yourself and see if I am in fault, as Herod represents. Joseph buried Jesus in his own tomb. Whether he contemplated his resurrection or calculated to cut him another, I cannot tell. The day after he was buried, one of the priests came to the praetorium and said they were apprehensive that his disciples intended to steal the body of Jesus and hide it, and then make it appear that he had risen from the dead, as he had foretold, and of which they were perfectly convinced. So this also happened in the Bible. I sent him to the captain of the royal guards, Malchus, to tell him to take the Jewish soldiers, place as many around the sepulchre as were needed. Then if anything should happen, they could blame themselves and not the Romans. When the great excitement arose about the sepulchre being found empty, I felt a deeper solicitude than ever. I sent for Malchus, who told me he had placed his lieutenant Ben Isham with 100 soldiers around the sepulchre. He told me that Isham and the soldiers were very much alarmed at what had occurred there that morning. I sent for this man Isham, who related to me, as near as I can recollect, the following circumstances. He said that at about the beginning of the 4th watch they saw a soft and beautiful light over the sepulchre. He at first thought that the woman had come to embalm the body of Jesus, as was their custom. But he could not see how they had gotten through the guards. While these thoughts were passing through his mind, behold, the whole place was lighted up, and there seemed to be crowds of the dead in their grave clothes. All seemed to be shouting and filled with ecstasy, while all around and above was the most beautiful music he had ever heard, and the whole air seemed to be full of voices praising God. At this time there seemed to be a reeling and swimming of the earth, so that he turned so sick and faint that he could not stand on his feet. In other words, he gets vertigo and just passes out. He said the earth seemed to swim from under him, and his senses left him, so that he knew not what did occur. I asked him in what condition he was when he came to himself. He said he was lying on the ground with his face down. I asked him if he could not have been mistaken as to the light. Was it not day that was coming in the east? He said at first he thought of that, but at a stone's cast it was exceedingly dark. And then he remembered it was too early for the day. I asked him if he had been questioned by the priest. He said he had. They wanted him to say it was an earthquake and that they were asleep, and offered him money to say that the disciples came and stole Jesus. But he saw no disciples. He did not know that the body was gone until he was told. In other words, this guard, he didn't even know the body was missing. He just passed out from that vertigo, saw this crazy sight of dead people in their grave clothes and singing and this majestic music, and just gets dizzy and passes out. He said that some of them thought that Jesus was no man, that he was not a human being, that he was not the son of Mary, that he was not the same that was said to be born of a virgin in Bethlehem, that the same person had been on the earth before with Abraham and Lot, and at many times and places. Yes, absolutely, because Jesus was in the Old Testament. He wrestled with Jacob, he visited Abraham, he saved Lot from Sodom and Gomorrah. It seems to me that if the Jewish theory be true, these conclusions are correct, for they are in accord with this man's life, as is known and testified by both friends and foes. For the elements were no more in his hands than the clay in the hands of the potter. He could convert water into wine. First miracle. He could change death into life, Lazarus, disease into health, the woman that bled, and the lepers, the blind, the deaf, the lame. He could calm the seas, still the storms, call up fish with the silver coin in its mouth. All of these miracles are things that Pilate is reporting to Tiberius Caesar. So if Pilate is reporting these miracles to Tiberius Caesar, do you think he just bought it willy-nilly, or do you think that he was really giving a true and accurate report as he was saying? Because if you can't even take Pilate's words to Tiberius Caesar, I mean, how can you really even expect to believe in the words of Jesus? That's what Jesus was saying to the Jews. Moses wrote about me, and if you believed in Moses, you would believe me because he wrote about me. And here we have Pontius Pilate writing about Jesus, and today all these children keep telling me, oh, there's no evidence, there's no proof. Okay, children, y'all keep thinking that. Now I say, if he could do all these things which he did, and many more, as the Jews all testify, and it was doing these things that created the enmity against him. He was not charged with criminal offenses, nor was he charged with violating any law, nor of wronging any individual in person. And all these facts are known to thousands as well by his foes as by his friends. I am almost ready to say, as did Manlius at the cross, truly this was the Son of God. That is written in Matthew and also in Mark. Now, noble sovereign, this is as near the facts in the case as I can arrive at, and I have taken pains to make the statement very full, so that you may judge of my conduct upon the whole, as I hear that Antipater has said many hard things of me in this matter. With the promise of faithfulness and good wishes to my noble sovereign, I am your most obedient servant, Pontius Pilate. So there you have it. We've got so many dots in Pilate's report to Tiberius Caesar that is literally lining up with all of the gospel accounts, even the smallest little details like pulling up a silver coin out of a fish's mouth. All those details are known to Pilate and was known to Tiberius Caesar. So y'all have a beautiful, blessed day. Thank you so much for hanging in here. Freemasonry is the devil. Spike Chambers, I hope you repent. Come to the knowledge of Jesus Christ. He loves you dearly. But I'm going to reset the live. That was Pilate's report. Y'all have a good one.
Could resist, mate.